Do you know a teen who is really impulsive? They can't seem to slow down at all. Or do you ever feel like you're repeating yourself over and over because they just can't seem to remember anything you said 2 seconds ago? What about those drastic emotional outbursts? No matter how logical you try to be, they lash out and blame you for everything. It's hard to keep up with these teens. A lot of this behavior is just normal teenage stuff, but if these issues are chronic and unbearable, then chances are the teenager has some kind of executive skill deficiency. And the good news is that all executive skills can be developed with time, patience, and consistency. Hello everyone, I'm Jessica Mintz, your favorite academic coach. I work with anxious high school students to help them achieve their academic goals by teaching them the executive skills they need to manage their stress and reach their full academic potential. Subscribe to my channel if you want regular tips on how to support successful students. In my first video in this series, I explained what executive skills are, how they support learning, and how to assess students' overall executive functioning. If you want a copy of my checklist for identifying executive skill strengths and weaknesses, please click on the link in the description below, fill out the Google form, and I will get that checklist to you as soon as possible. Before we dive into teaching students, especially teenagers, new skills, I want to emphasize two things. The first is the importance of buy-in. Teenagers want autonomy, so give it to them. Don't tell them what to do, but rather share with them what you're noticing in their behavior and thought patterns, why you think there's a problem, and that you know a way to help them. Then, the most important part, ask if they would be open to hearing what you have to say. If they say no, then respect that and walk away. It's likely, though, that students are going to be kind of curious and will say yes. Approaching students with consent for advice will help build that trusting foundation you need for them to know that you believe in them and their self-determination. Okay, so the second thing you need to remember is patience. Executive skill development is not at all linear. Along with the teenager in your life, choose one executive skill area to focus on at a time. Wait for mastery before introducing another skill to focus on. Start with the skill area that can be easily tackled if possible. This approach will give both you and the student in your life some positive feelings of success, making the student open to learning even more skills. Be positive and flexible as you move through the process and try to respond to resistance with creative solutions. Phew. Now that that's out of the way, I want to share with you the full definitions of response inhibition, working memory, and emotional control, how these skills develop in the brain, and some tactics for strengthening these skill areas. Let's start by defining response inhibition. Richard Guare and Dawson defined it as the capacity to think before you act, to resist the urge to do or say something before you had the chance to evaluate the situation and the possible consequences. Response inhibition acts as a risk management system, performing cost-benefit analyses of each decision. Risk is everywhere, and for students with response inhibition as a lagging skill, they can get themselves into some potentially dangerous situations. This is generally a skill that gives parents the most anxiety because the parents cannot protect their child as they get older. For teachers, response inhibition is desirable in the classroom to foster productive conversations and to maintain the flow of a lesson, among other things. So let's dig a little deeper into how this skill develops. Response inhibition first comes about in infancy, where the infant decides whether or not to respond to an experience, person, or object. Once they start to develop the language, then they start to inhibit their responses because of the internalized rules set by the adults, like don't touch the stove. Response inhibition is closely linked to other executive skills as it sets the stage for the other skills to develop. But in adolescence, response inhibition is disrupted with the influence of peers and gut feelings, thus resulting in potentially risky behavior. Teenagers want to go with the flow with their friends, and they don't tend to consider the consequences of their decisions. Here are some tactics for supporting their response inhibition development. Assume that when with their peers, a teen is going to have a reduced impulse control. So set clear expectations before they're in a social setting. Make sure these expectations have specific limits and consequences. Know where they're going, whom they will be with, and the time frame they're expected to be back. Have a set procedure for notifying each other when the plans change. Communicate clearly with other adults who will be around the teen to ensure that there is a collaborative team looking out for their health and safety. Another tip, expect the teen to choose the fun activities over challenging or non-pleasurable ones. Their brains are not yet fully wired to understand the consequences of focusing exclusively on pleasurable activities. Instead of showing frustration with their choices, accept the reality of their situation. Communicate clearly with the teen the consequences of their choices and why it might be worrisome to you. Collaborate on finding a balanced approach. Next, delay gratification as much as possible. Use waiting periods for things the teen wants to do or have. Using first, then schedules would be an easy way to accomplish this. For example, first do 3 Pomodoro timers working through your English homework, then you can play your video game for 45 minutes. Similarly, create ways for the student in your life to earn something they want. Maybe they have to save for a portion of the car they want, or they have to pay for the insurance on that car. Push back on giving them the things they want right away. Also, regularly review the rules and expectations together. Make it something that they can't possibly forget. Sharing the rules beforehand will be crucial for maintaining the relationship and expectations. Present the information as you coming from a place of caring and wanting them to be safe. These tactics are certainly not foolproof. It's going to take a lot of open communication and active listening in order to maintain a healthy relationship. Just like response inhibition, working memory difficulties can cause a number of issues in day-to-day life. Working memory has a 2-part definition. First, it's the ability to hold information in mind while performing a complex task. The second part is the ability to draw on past learning or experience and apply it to the situation at hand or predict future outcomes. This definition from Dawson and Guare highlights how experience impacts our future decision making, but we have to be able to juggle all of the information in our minds at once. It can be really taxing. Working memory develops in infancy at about 6 months old. This is when you can hide a toy behind a box and the infant will push the box aside to find the toy. They saw you put the object there and held on to that memory long enough to find it again. As toddlers develop language, it's common to overhear them managing their own behavior by repeating directions heard from their parents or caregiver. Among adolescents, working memory deficiency might be seen in the classroom when the student does not remember the question that was just asked of them 2 seconds prior. Or maybe the teen in your life made an impulsive decision and you asked, "What were you thinking?" To which they responded with a blank stare. They aren't ignoring you with that response. Really, they're struggling to reflect on their behavior and come up with an answer to your question because their prefrontal cortex is flooded with the emotion of getting caught doing something wrong, risky, or dangerous. How can we support students with weak working memory skills? We can start by making eye contact with them before telling them something they need to remember. Simple eye contact, while not guaranteed, is a good way to capture their attention. Also, reduce competing distractions when giving directions to the teenager. If they are watching TV, scrolling through social media apps, or furiously texting with their friends, they are most likely not listening to your directions. Don't make assumptions, slow down. Ask for their attention, and when they've made eye contact, start giving the directions. This next tip, I urge you to use only if you absolutely have to, because teenagers find it annoying. Ask them to paraphrase what you just said. As adults, we can probably all remember a time when we rolled our eyes at our parents for using this tactic. But I will say this strategy often works well in the classroom. After giving directions to the whole class, ask one student to paraphrase the directions to everyone. Or separate the class into small groups and assign one person in each group the job of paraphrasing the directions. Next, consider the timing of your directions. You want to be mindful of the student's context. Are they transitioning between stressful activities? Are they tired and preparing for bed? Are they just waking up and not yet ready to hear the expectations of them for the day? Whatever it might be, I encourage you to take a breath and consider the student's context before overloading them with information. Something else you can do is use written and technological reminders. Post-it notes in key places around the house or the classroom can support a student in remembering the steps of a routine. Calendar and reminder apps can support the student on the go. All of these reminders can reduce potential negative confrontations between the adult and the student, since the reminder comes from an outside source. Also, reinforce positive behavior by reminding the student of times when they were successful. For example, you were really responsible the last time you took my hall pass from the classroom. You left and came back within 5 minutes, so that other students could use the privilege. You can also use negative outcomes so long as the reminder is non-judgmental. This can be tricky, but if you remember to frame the message as concern and care for the student, then they're more likely to openly receive what you have to say. Next, avoid forcing calendar reminders, apps, and other similar tools onto the student in your life. Instead, approach it as an opportunity for them to demonstrate control over their own lives. This is an essential skill for adulthood, so empower young people to stretch this muscle. And if forgetfulness in class continues to be a really big issue, then get the student in the habit of writing things down. Have them use key words instead of complete sentences to jog their memory. Students might also be able to advocate for themselves with their teachers by asking for note outlines or handouts, so the student does not have to hold so many things in their brain at once. Developing working memory is really tricky since so many adolescents want their independence but are not ready for the demands of adulthood. Regardless, all of these executive skills are connected. So finding out the students' areas of strength to build their weaknesses would be a worthwhile discovery all on its own. You can probably see how weak working memory might lead to issues with emotional control related to frustration, confusion, and social pressure. Dawson and Guare define emotional control as the ability to manage emotions in order to help ourselves regulate and guide our behavior, perform tasks, and reach goals. When a student has a quick temper, cries easily, and/or can't seem to get out of a bad mood, they are going to struggle to make friends, manage their academic schedule, and perform well in extracurriculars. Emotional control develops when we are babies. We often see babies express their emotions with laughter, cooing, and crying. Babies need their parents at first to help them calm down. But in time, as babies start to learn the skill of emotional control, they will start to soothe themselves. Emotional control will show up again as the baby becomes a toddler. Some toddlers have many meltdowns and tantrums, while others don't. This is a time when they become accustomed to their schedule, and people start to see outbursts when they're adapting to changes. Moving into elementary school, students with weak emotional control skills will feel increased expectations related to their social, academic, and behavioral performance, which inevitably creates some distress. But when the child reaches adolescence, they are susceptible to heightened emotional intensity and emotional breakdowns related to stressful events in their lives. This heightened emotional intensity has a biological and developmental reason for it. Biologically, the adolescent's brain is just experiencing emotions intensely, but developmentally, the prefrontal cortex is not able to dampen those emotions. So we're left with a highly emotional individual who has little ability to consider all of the facts surrounding their feelings. They're just in it. You can expect more heated confrontations during this time. So here are some tips for increasing emotional control in everyday life. Have clear and specific rules. Dawson and Guare note 3 rule categories. The information category, who, what, where, when. The permission category, like time needed to come home and acceptable use of technology. And the prohibition category, people, places, activities that are off limits. Negotiate the rules as necessary, but be very clear about the expectations that haven't changed and enforce them accordingly. Also, share all appointments, family gatherings, and other events on a family calendar. Make sure everyone has access. As families start to raise teenagers, the schedule becomes really full really fast. Hold everyone accountable to it. This will reduce the number of surprises for the teen, which will also reduce emotional outbursts if they have to cancel plans with a friend because it conflicts with a prearranged family outing. Next, use your active listening skills. The emotional dysregulated adolescent wants to be validated, not made to feel ashamed about what's going on for them. Avoid immediately offering opinions, judgments, or solutions. Simply saying, wow, that's a lot to have on your plate, can go a really long way in supporting the teen. Also, negotiate rules and expectations whenever possible. Not only does the teen get a sense of autonomy in that process, but they also will feel like their perspective matters and deserves consideration. We want to help develop confident, strong, thoughtful adults, and this would be a good practice in showing them how adults can listen and compromise when safe and appropriate. Next, avoid saying no automatically. Listen to the teen's entire request and stay calm. Reflect back to them what you heard and then explain your concerns and hesitations. Be prepared to explain your no. Preparing adolescents for adulthood is challenging and rife with confrontation and emotional outbursts. There's this tension between the parent who knows their child isn't ready for independence and the teenager who desperately wants to be trusted to make a good decision for their life. The best way to manage this tension is to just acknowledge it. Hear one another out and remind the teenager that in life we will be faced with many challenges. There's no one-size-fits-all solution for enhancing executive skills, but there are some concrete communication styles that can support the teen's development. Today we covered the definition, development, and tips for addressing response inhibition, working memory, and emotional control executive skills. If this information was helpful for you, please like and subscribe to my channel. My next video will address flexibility, sustained attention, and task initiation. All of these skills build off of one another, so find out how to create a supportive learning environment for the teenagers in your life. I'm looking forward to seeing you here again soon.